Welcome to the Sensible Socialist Podcast, a podcast for the rational left.
We need to unite and work together if we're all going to get through this. Sounds like socialism to me.
The amount of people I see talking about socialism positively is actually staggering.
Do you think, do you really think that a proletarian revolution is just around the corner in America?
Grab your pitchforks and stab your mayor.
Your hero, Obama.
He's not my hero. I'm
How
not
heroic
fucking
he
idiot.
comes
If Bernie Sanders were president, right, and he wanted to bring the same ideas as for socialism into this country, do you think that we would benefit?
Yeah.
But I just told you Venezuela's eating rats.
But I just want people to have health care. I don't want,
Same thing Hugo Chavez.
oh my god. You people have, worms in your brain, honestly.
Welcome back to the Sensible Socialist Podcast. I'm your host, Kevin Gustafson. With me is Naveen Angamuthu. Naveen is from Bangalore, India, and I met him a few years ago when I was traveling in Bangalore with my wife. And we had a great conversation, and he seemed to have really good analysis about what was sort of going on in India at that time. And recently, India has been in the news because there has been massive demonstrations against the Citizenship Amendment Act, which is basically an inherently discriminatory law that prevents Muslim immigrants from nearby countries from getting citizenship in the way that other people in India would get citizenship. So this caused quite an uproar, and I wanted to talk to Naveen about that situation, and also just to kind of give a background about some of the political history and the history of the left in India generally. So we talk a lot about that and a number of different things, and so just warning, there was some technical difficulties, and so I've tried to edit it as much to make it as smooth as possible, but you will notice some differences in quality and things like that. But I still think the conversation was good enough that we should definitely release this episode. So without further ado, here's Naveen Angamuthu. Naveen, it's awesome to have you on the podcast and to talk about what's going on in India, because I think what's going on in India is incredibly important and not always well covered in the United States in particular, which I think a lot of people are coming from. So thanks for being on the Sensible Socialist Podcast.
Okay. Yeah, sure, Kevin. Thanks for having me on your show.
So the first question that I always ask anybody who comes on the podcast is to talk a little bit about themselves, just to kind of give an introduction. So the first question is, do you call yourself a socialist? And if you do, sort of what do you mean by that? And how did you come to be a socialist?
I came across socialism. So I come from the southern part of India. And as most people know, it's not a very well developed or not very privileged place to be from. Hardships going on, and I'm basically from a working class family. And anyone knows a bit about India also, I'm sure, has come across the a cultural context like the caste system that's prevalent in the society. We are from one of the oppressed caste backgrounds, and even my grandfather's families were not allowed to enter into upper caste people's homes. So that's the background that we are from. And during the early days, the 80s, 1990s, my father got involved in this Stalinist prominent parties, BI, that's the Communist Party of India. So that's how I got introduced to the left political ideology, and to an extent, within the prevailing context and within the prevailing social conditions, the getting behind the left parties or joining the left union. My father was an industrial machine worker. He was naturally a part of the trade union movement, and so he started getting involved in the left movement outside the trade union activities that gave us a bit of an assert a stage for us to assert our rights basically. So that gave me a chance to look up to. So okay, yeah, that's having a common political ideology. That particularly have ideology that drives us on. That's solely based on equality among lives. That was the one that was deprived to us anciently in this part of the country. So we were naturally accustomed to this idea of equality. Everything under the sun should be equally distributed to all the people living on this earth. So that's how basically I got introduced to this ideology, and that's the theme that inspired me the most to take this up and to follow through. And going through the literatures and getting into debates and following the national activities, we found it eventually got into the discussions between failed Soviet Union, rise of the Soviet Union, fall of the Soviet Union, bureaucratic stance of the Stalinist government, and the failure of the left movements in India in particular. So that set me on a process of new search too. And then we found out I stumbled upon both international Trotsky, some ideologies of Trotsky, the works of Trotsky, idea of permanent revolution, and here I am.
All right, all right. So what I want to talk about the demonstrations and against the changes in the citizenship situation in India, but to give a bit I think it's important to kind of give a bit of a background, and so it's a huge topic, but I'm hoping you can give me like a 5 or 10 minute sort of background on Indian political history from the sort of independence moment to Narendra Modi. There's a lot there. I know the sort of creation of the republic, the split with Pakistan, the emergency. There's a lot of different things that you could talk about. But could you give me a sort of broad picture of Indian political history since the end of end of the 1940s?
Yeah, sure, Kevin. As you have already mentioned, it's a lot from 1940s. That's one of the most significant periods in the history of the subcontinent, this region. To start with, I think we will have to start from the inception of Indian National Congress. That's the present-day Congress Party, which was then a movement, a people's-based movement fighting for the independence of the then colonial India. So I think I don't want to get too much into the histories of the works of Gandhi or Jawaharlal Nehru or how the independence movement built up. I want to focus more on what are the after events that was happened after the post independence. So after the declaration of independence, the freedom movement, that was the International Congress, was formally formed into a political party, and because of the prevailing political situation then, it was the single most largest party in the entire country, and they remained in period from since conception 1947 till 1970s. They remained unchallenged for close to 33 decades. They ruled the country, and whatever the infrastructure, whatever the state the present country is in, is because of the steps taken by either good or bad policies of the then INC. So, during this independence freedom struggle, there was a parallel movement going on, which gave rise to the Swayam which was then a religious outfit then, which during the partition, I think people are aware of the partition of bifurcation of India. During the 1940s, post-independence, Pakistan was declared as an independent country from the then British rule. There was East Pakistan and there was West Pakistan, which again India intervened and helped mediate the independence of East Pakistan, and which was then renamed into Bangladesh, present-day Bangladesh. So the religious outfit that I mentioned, RSS, thrived on that idea that the partition of the states in 1940s, that is Pakistan and East and West Pakistan, was betrayal of the Hindu people. They somehow have this idea of India being an monotheistic Hinduist uh, yeah, uh, landmass. They have this idea that India has been a Hindu Rashtra. That's the term we use. Hindu Rashtra means kingdom of the Hindus. So the entire agenda of that particular outfit is to establish establish the Hindu Rashtra, that of the most of the Sadist and including countries like Pakistan, India, Nepal, Bangladesh, Bhutan, and Sri Lanka. So they call like, what do you call, they say those glorious days, they drag towards the legendary days of the Hindu pinnacle, yeah, periods of golden era of Hinduism. So they want to establish it back. So that's the entire agenda of they have used this partition of the states to grow since the 1970s.
The person who assassinated Gandhi, I think a lot of people know that.
Yes, yeah, I was just about
because that is something I think that a lot of people don't, like, people know that Gandhi was assassinated, but not a lot of people, I think, especially in the United States, know that the person that assassinated him was assassinated. It was like because he wasn't Hindu enough. He wasn't being enough because of the partition and things like that. Is that right?
Yes, that's precisely it. So I think anyone who observes Indian history would have come Gandhi's assassination, partition of India, and the riots that happened post partition. So there was a huge scale riots going over in Pakistan, and at the same time in India, the northwestern parts of India that border Pakistan. There was rampant attacks on minorities on both sides. Where Muslims in Pakistan, whereas Muslims were the majority and the minority Hindus were attacked, and which was the opposite case in India, where Hindus were the majority and the minority Muslims were attacked. Thousands of lives lost. The assassinator of Gandhi was a product of this partition riots. Because that was the role of the fringe outfit that I mentioned earlier.
Mm-hmm.
They indulge in propaganda, false propaganda that Gandhi had betrayed the Hindu nation.
Hmm.
He acted like he's scared of the Hindu people, but then anyone reading Gandhi's works, they can come across Gandhi was sympathetic towards Hindu's religion. He felt that the Hinduism as a system is good, but it can be sorted out. The issues like untouchability, casteism,
Mm-hmm.
inequality can be sorted out within Hinduism, and he tried to propose a benevolent Hinduism kind of thing. But the fringe group's propaganda was such that while Gandhi to us he keeps speaking like a friend of us. He wants to improve Hinduism. He wants to reform Hinduism. But at the other end, he has betrayed us by allowing the partition of Bangladesh and Pakistan. So the person who assassinated Gandhi was one Natram Godse. Sermons, propaganda sermons by the founder of RSS. Radicalized by their hate speeches, and he got Gandhi in the end. So this is the history of the particular movement, RSS political organization, which gave gave rise to the present day party BJP, that's Bharatiya Janata Party.
Mm-hmm.
So one of the main point that I need to make across is post assassination of Gandhi, the fringe group was outlawed, banned in India. Under the sun, this group was outlawed. Then all relevant activities or all related activities to this outfit was outlawed, and the movement was close to wiped out. But then the flaws of the mistakes of the then Congress party.
Hmm.
So the Congress, Indian National Congress, post independence was mostly it was controlled by trading elements. We say Bania, businessmen,
Mm.
businessmen. more like a bourgeois layer.
Right. The capitalist, I mean, the Indian National Congress represents the capitalist class.
Yes, precisely. So then the Indian capitalist class where we had the true intention, the movement could have been wiped out. But their flaws or their mistakes, their sympathetic attitude towards made them recall that ban. They basically allowed the RSS movement to grow and spread their hate speech and spread their to haunt all the people of India. The background of why such history of India, BJP has been in power less than 7 years probably. They had four independent terms. First time was in the early 1990s, which was a short stint of 1 year, and there was again a 4-year period by Vajpayee in 1996, and then there was this 2014 period, Modi's regime, where Modi was propped up by the media, capitalist bosses press as savior of Gujarat and bringer of development on all those mumbo jumbos, and they brought him back to power in 2011. During which period he thrust various anti-poor policies like demonetization, GST, all such anti-people's policies, which led to loss of lives in it.
Mm-hmm.
But again, the propaganda machinery of the RSS movement convinced people, successfully divided the people. I would say, successfully divided the people into Hindu, Muslim vote bank politics.
The thing for me is when you look at the Indian Constitution and some of the important founding people in the Indian Republic, there was this idea that they wanted to have a secular, even quote unquote socialist republic that would not be divided on caste, and that wouldn't and other kinds of ways or religion that you could discriminate in India. But in the course of the history of India, there's been this continuous undercurrent of both caste, class, and religious conflict that the Indian National Congress party could never really move beyond and inflamed. And then, but what I find interesting is the sort of jump by the capitalist class from from Congress to BJP, because that I think is really and something that Modi, especially in Gujarat and stuff, has adopted neoliberal economic policies and Hindu nationalism sort of together, and I think that's appealing to a lot of the capitalist class in India. Would you agree with that?
Yes, Karan. Yes, you're right. Actually, post independence, the then leaders of the Indian National Congress, like Nehru or Mahatma Gandhi, or leaders like Vallabhbhai Patel or Raja Mohan Roy, these kind of leaders were impressed by the Soviets' development. I mean, 1920s. There was a Soviet revolution, workers' revolution nearby, very close to India, and they saw the development. They saw the change that was made possible through following socialist policies.
Yeah.
And thanks to the October Revolution of 1980, they were very much impressed by it, that they wanted to replicate it. They wanted to replicate an Indianized version of it.
Mm-hmm.
Because by then the Stalinist bureaucracies and the Red Terror has already been done, so they had their own hesitations to go with the full workers' control. And also influenced by the then business supporters, Indian capitalist class of the 1940s period, who were the funding or who were the main funders for the operations of Indian National Congress.
Right.
So they couldn't go against their own support base.
Yeah.
We will go with the full-fledged workers control socialism. So they wanted to trust their own version of socialism, Nehruvian socialism, the political circles would call it. Even most of the policies were almost were inspired by the Soviets. We had 5-year term plans, 5-year development plans, which was straight away lifted from Soviet Union's initial policies.
Right.
So Soviet Union had a lot of influence post independence of the thing, but then due to the inherent, I would say, due to the inherent consumption of the then leaders of the Indian National Congress, on paper they called it, even the words of a constitution carry the words secular socialist republic of India. It has been 70 years. Where is socialism? It has been completely wiped. Put on the back seat, I would say. So Congress had put it on paper, but then had to remain loyal to its Indian capitalist support base. They were neither here or not there. They had to cater to the needs of the Indian capitalist class, but then also they had this baggage of socialism placed on them by Nehru or the founding fathers.
Yeah.
In 1980s, during Indira Gandhi's period, most of the banks were nationalized. That's probably that is one of the most prominent thing, I would say, in the Indian history of nationalization policies. But that was it. Post Indira Gandhi's term, with the oncoming of Rajiv Gandhi, India went full-fledged, followed liberalist policies. That was during the periods. I mean, late 1980s and early 1990s, when liberalism was peaking, starting to grow throughout the world. So that's during those periods, socialism was fully put on the back seat. They went full-fledged on the following liberalization policies. They announced FDI. They allowed privatization of a lot of sectors. Such anti-people and such liberal policies were.
So you have the sort of liberalization, neoliberal policies on the one hand of like the Modi BJP, but you also have the Hindu nationalist aspect that I think is most recently embodied in the changes to the sort of citizenship laws and things like that. So there's been a lot of demonstrations in India, against the changes in the policy. So can you give me a sort of quick background on what this proposed change is and why there's been such an uproar about it?
Yes, Karan. So initially, as I have mentioned earlier, the party came into the existence solely based on the promise that they will establish they will restore the previous glory of Hinduist nation or Hindu Rashtra in this particular landmass. And one of the first ways to do that is identify the outsiders. That's what they call it. So they want to say that. You see, Hinduism is the indigenous religion of India, while other Islamic religion or Christianity were influences that came from outside, either from the West or from the Middle East. So they wanna bifurcate. They wanna divide people on such lines. That is that gave rise to this CAA, that is Citizenship Amendment Act, that has came up today.
And what does the Amendment Act actually do?
Okay, so the basic thing with the Citizenship Amendment Act is that it registers. They say it's a register of citizenship. So far, who have been migrated into India since before 1970s will be granted naturalized citizenships of India. But then who immigrated or after 1970s, to get a citizenship, they will have to provide documents and they will have to be either Hindus or Christians or Buddhists or Jains or any other religion except Muslims. This is the crux of the issue. India, as it says in the preamble of the constitution, it's a secular country. It cannot divide the people, or it cannot say it cannot grant any preference to based on religious lines, whether the party or whether the party likes it or not. It's a secular country, as it says in the constitution. So people, the recent CAA bill that has been pushed in, that has got approval of both the houses in the parliament, and that has become an official act now. What it does is it basically says to establish your citizenship in India, you will have to be a non-Muslim for immigrants, particularly.
This seems
Yeah,
so obviously contrary to the principle of like a secular republic that India is supposed to be. How, like, do you think that the Supreme Court will intervene and sort of and overturn this? What do you think? It just seems like such a strange thing because it's so obviously discriminatory that.
yeah.
Do you think it's just pandering to their religious zealot, base, or like why do this?
Okay. Yeah. Yes, Kevin. That was a nice question you asked. So, uh, you hit it on the head because it is catering to their religious base.
Mm.
It's a Hindu national party, no doubt of Hindu national party, no doubt about it. It is splitting peoples into two groups. It is pitting each one against us. It's again similar to the situation elsewhere in the world, maybe in US or the UK's, where right wing forces has come up either in Brazil or either in Israel.
Mm-hmm.
So it divides people into two groups. They have found a scapegoat.
Mm-hmm.
In the current scenario, it's the Muslims. India being a Hindu majority region, and most of the news outlets and most of the pillars of democracy, as they say, judiciary, press, administration, are all invariably being controlled by Hindu bosses. So it has become easy for them to peddle this idea, to reach out to the people that Muslims, all Muslims are outsiders. They will have to will have to come back, because that was a movement, that is bring them back home. Whoever converted back to other religions, there was a movement initiated by this nationalist right in religious fundamentalists that we will convert them back to Hinduism.
Yeah.
These are things that has happened in 2014 to 2019. Now this is to be seen as an extension of that. So whoever is not converted, they will be termed not citizens of this country, thereby denying them their right to vote.
Yeah, it's the intention to tie citizenship in India with being a Hindu.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah, and I
no. Okay, it's not. It's like currently it's not the. Currently, that's not what they portray, but that's the idea. That's their agenda, I would say.
Yeah.
So today, the argument they make is we are not doing this act will not harm any of the Muslims that are already citizens of India. This particular act is only to limit the refugees. Let's say the Rohingya refugee crisis that most people would have been aware of, where the minority Muslims were persecuted in Myanmar.
Mm-hmm.
Burma, then they migrated to other neighboring countries, fearing persecution. So they say that this act on the paper. They say that this act is just to avoid, or just to stop in the infiltration of such illegal immigrants into the country. We are not going to harm any of our Muslims that are present or that are already citizens of India, and they need not to be scared about it or anything. That's what on paper they say, but we being from India, we know how the apparatus and the system and the state machinery works.
Mm-hmm.
The system is not watertight, and one of the proofs or evidences that everyone will have to submit to the government is basically our voter identity cards. That is the identity card that we provide to the election commission department to allow us to vote in elections.
Mm-hmm.
That will not be considered as an valid citizen proof of citizenship.
What is then?
Yeah, that's what is that. I'll tell you the list of documents that will not be considered. That is that electoral voters identity card will not be considered as proof. Your passports, the passports we get to immigrate or we get to travel to other countries will not be considered as a document of citizenship.
What?
They demand that we will have to provide certificates, either birth certificates or land registration, property ownership documents predated to 1970s.
So, like, like that's an incredibly laughable conclusion to anyone who, like, obviously lives in or has even visited India. Like the idea that people that plots of land in India have been perfectly divided up and all of the land deeds and everything have transferred from, there are some people who've been on that same plot of land for 1,000 years. So like, how are they going to show you, like, even going back to the 1970s, India has, like some unseen amount of its entire economy is informal and, isn't subject to taxation or any kind of stuff like that. So the idea that you're going to have all of this formal documentation is ridiculous.
Yes, Kevin. That's precisely my point. Because the state machinery or documentation or administration is not so watertight as you see in the West. It's not so developed. Even the people are not so very literate, even to an extent to have to safeguard their ownership documents. Up until late 1900s or 1950s, 1980s, people there was not so much of a concept of importance, significance to the documents because of the illiteracy and poverty and those kind of reasons. People didn't realize such importance. But the crux of the issue here is that you will have to provide documentation for your existence of your fathers or forefathers before 1970s to get registered as citizens. If you cannot provide such documents, everyone else except Muslims will be granted citizenship through this law that has been passed now. That is the CAA, Citizenship Amendment Act.
Oh.
That's where the issue lies. So to the general public, or when it says about the press, or to the majoritarian people, Hindu people, or let it be any other religious, maybe Christians or Muslims, or Christians or Buddhists or Jains or Sikhs, Parsis, any other religion, any other people need not be worried about it. Even if they have documents, even if they don't have documents, they will become naturalized citizens through the CAA, except Muslims. So when we will go into the demographics of India, I mean, India is the majoritarian Hindu majoritarian country, but the Muslim population constitutes about 17 to 18% of the entire populace. And taking a deeper look into this Muslim population, most of them, I would say about 70 to 80% of the population are what we call here as below poverty line.
Okay.
They are on the fringes. They are either daily wage workers, they are coolies here. So they do some menial jobs, and they traders, daily vendors, shopkeepers, or metal workers, those kind of things. So their life's hard. They can't run behind the documentations and all these process. We know. I mean, I have a bit of a decent education. I work in one of technical companies in Bangalore, one of the IT hubs. But then I find it difficult to get a government document from any of the government officers. My name got left out of voters election, and I had to visit our local electoral registration office thrice. I had to apply leave from my office, and I have to travel back to my hometown and get registered myself as a valid voter.
Wow.
In my constituency. This is not going to be possible for many of the daily wage workers who are already on the fringe.
Right.
It's like they're already marginalized, and through this act, they're going to push them out.
It's very reminiscent to me of what happens to black people in the United States. And voting limitations on voting, making it more difficult than it needs to be to do that kind of stuff to an already marginalized group. It seems that there's just an interesting parallel. And I mean, I think it would probably be important to mention too that when Modi was he the governor of Gujarat? There was an incident of basically anti-Muslim violence, and that this is somebody like during. And I mean, I don't. Can you give some give the sort of background for that story?
Sure, Kevin. I can understand what that incident that you recall. He was the chief minister of the state of Gujarat, and there was an incident that is called presently it's termed as the Gujarat riots, Godhra riots. It's precisely called as Godhra riots. So during that particular incident, what happened was there was a train of carrying Hindu pilgrims, which was stoned and attacked due to a local ongoing tension between Hindu and Muslims. And the train was set on fire, and close to 100 people died, who were mostly Hindu pilgrims, died. And Modi was at the time chief minister of the Gujarat state where this particular incident took place. And as a follow to this train fire incident, there was a huge scale riots. Hindu outfits, basically the RSS and its allied organizations and all other fringe Hindu national-led groups went out on riots into the states, and basically they massacred Muslims in hundreds. The cases are still ongoing. I mean, that case was so very much shocking that the pure amount of people that were killed due to the inaction of the government, because he was the chief minister of the state. He could have instructed his police force to intervene and stop the rioters. He wanted to play to the sentiments of the Hindu majority of voters that he is a protector or a benevolent protector of a Hindu religion, and he will allow for such persecutions of Muslims.
Right.
This is what in 2002 to 2004. He was charged by the High Courts and Supreme Courts of India, and then he was released. He was acquitted. Yeah, he was acquitted from the particular case, citing insufficient evidence and all. Because the courts in India are again another sorrow story that I will have to talk to you in detail.
Yeah.
The present day, the courts have become fully occupied by the right wing Hindu sympathists. Again, that's another sad story of Indian democracy. So the courts literally let them free, and even the international bodies, US had denied visa to Narendra Modi for close to 8 to 10 years, citing his inaction during the Gujarat riots. That again gave him the platform to become the Prime Minister of India, which he wants to perpetuate now. He wants to perpetuate his Gujarat violence-based hatred politics to the entire country. That's what we see today. So today in Uttar Pradesh, last week in Uttar Pradesh, there were close to 20 people were killed during the protests of the CAA Act, protest against the CAA Act that has been passed. 20 people, and all of them are Muslims. Minors, 16-year-old kids were shot at, citing they were pelting stones. It's almost, I don't know, maybe I'm drawing parallels here, but it's almost as we see what's going on in Israel. Israel and Palestine, the conflict between Israel and Palestine. The Israel security forces shoot down Palestinians, young schools, students, colleges, or nurses, citing that they were pelting stones on an armed Israeli policeman. That's the exact same trend that they are following here in India. The death toll throughout the country would have reached by 50 now. People are being killed for protesting on the streets, and this Hindu right-wing fringe group that I mentioned earlier, they act as militias and attack minority areas in India, the police watches by. They do not intervene. They do not stop. They just simply watch us by. Exactly what they did in Gujarat in 2002 during the Godhra riot. So he is tagging his hatred, and he is playing his Hindu versus Muslim agenda.
So I want to talk a little bit about the demonstrations themselves. I'm very curious as to the sort of the demographics of who is demonstrating. So is it mostly young people? Is it people of all ages? Is it mostly Muslims, or is it a mix of Muslims and Hindus? Is it working class people, or is it more professional people? Who's out demonstrating? And what are they all demonstrating against the same thing, or are people coming to it for different reasons?
Okay, Kevin. See this. This question is bit. I will have to answer this question in two parts, because there are protests going for the overall. It seems there's a lot of protests going on, and the demands vary from region to region. See, yeah, I mean, this discussion is going to go long today. I believe more than the specified 1 hour that you intimated, because we anyone who is familiar with the context of India and the history of India, it's comprised of various nationalities. So it's a very diverse country, and it's comprised of various nationalities. As Lenin mentioned, it's like a prison house of nations. So I would like to talk. I would like to answer this question in two parts. That's one is regarding the protests going on in the mainland India, and there are again a different set of protests with different set of demands that is going on in the northeastern parts of India. So northeastern parts of India are more demographically a bit different. They joined the Indian Union, agreed to certain terms. People must have been familiar with the recent outfall of Kashmir. Kashmir, northeastern states, and many of the states during the formation of India in 1947, they agreed to join into the Indian Union, the erstwhile princely states. Because we keep talking about India, and people get illusion that India has been a single country because of the propaganda of the Hindu or nationalist dominated media again. People get into the idea that India has been historically a single entity. Never has been in the history before 1947. India was ruled by a single majoritarian ruler. All throughout its history, some part of the states were ruled by one leader or the other. Even during the Mughals invasion, right from the birth of Jesus Christ, probably I would say, if we take if we predate it to past 200 years, 2000 years in history, never has India been ruled by a single political entity. Let it be empire, or let it be an aristocrat, or whatever forms of political states were there. British, the East India Company was the first formal political identity that was laid on this landmass. So post independence by the East India Company, India, 60 to 70 princely states were again agreed to join in the Indian Union, putting forward certain terms to join into this union. One of such terms was from Kashmir. Similar to Kashmir, there were a lot of other terms put forward by the northeastern states. Northeast in the sense Sikkim, Assam, Sikkim, Manipal, Arunachal Pradesh. We have there are 7 states of the northeast, of which Assam is the biggest states, and all other are minor states. They agreed to join into the Indian Union, agreeing to certain terms. But the present BJP party, to steamroll its Hindu nationalist agenda, they want to form this unified state, and they are cancelling all the previous agreements made. Which one of the major things was done on Kashmir. Kashmir joined into the Indian Union through an Article 370, which granted its rights to have its own self-autonomy. Property ownership. The people from India, mainland India, could not buy properties here inside Kashmir.
Mm-hmm.
Stop Kashmir becoming a colonial colony of India, majoritarian India. So these there are a lot of terms that were listed in that article. There was a lot of provisions provided to safeguard the interests of the Kashmiri people,
Mm-hmm.
which were cancelled a year back. Similar thing is going on in Northeast. Similar states, a lot of terms that were, a lot of provisions that were granted to the Northeastern people are being cancelled. And the main focus of the protests that are going in Northeast is that CAA, Citizenship Amendment Act, grants citizenship to all other immigrants, let it be Hindus or Buddhists or Christians, in these northeastern states. The northeastern states will have to look, will have to take a closer look at the demographics and the composition of the northeastern states, because geographically they are the hilly terrain. They are on the hillsides. The people are from the indigenous tribal groups.
Mm-hmm.
Compared to the mainland India, northeast states are still bit. Um, I wouldn't say primitive, but I would say less developed. I
Yeah.
wouldn't use the term developed. Less industrialized or less commercialized.
Mm-hmm.
In terms of education, in terms of industrialization, and in terms of other technological advancements. So, in terms of in terms of demographics, in terms of economy, in terms of education, infrastructure,
Yeah.
and everything, the northeastern states are a bit at a disadvantage.
Mm-hmm.
And there were certain provisions that were granted to them under the treaty which they got joined into the Indian Union in the 1947s. And the BJP, present day BJP, to steamroll their Hindu Rashtra agenda, they are cancelling previous agreed upon terms. So one of the complications with CAA happening in Northeast is that the CAA Act grants citizenship to any immigrant moving into Northeast India, which puts the indigenous Northeast population at a disadvantage, because compared to the more economically well privileged mainland Indian citizens, moving into the Northeast puts them at a disadvantage. And the Northeast indigenous people wants to assert their rights, and they don't want this CAA Act to be implemented in those 7 states. They don't want to. They don't want the government to make it easier for settlers, colonial settlers, to move into their indigenous land, and putting themselves at a disadvantage. So that's the crux of the protests that are going on, that are being carried out by the Northeast population. And the Northeast that has been going on in Northeast states like Assam, Nagaland, Sikkim, Manipur, Meghalaya, and Arunachal Pradesh.
Mm-hmm.
The protests that are going on around the mainland, most of the mainland India, is almost the opposite of what's going on in the Northeast, but due to various reasons. Because the Northeast people want to protect their own identity, because they are already at a disadvantage, and they are already being oppressed by the majoritarian Hindu governments. So don't want to be more secular. They don't want to. They don't want CAA to provide a way for settler colonization. So that's the reason behind the protest. But in the mainland India, what's being the people are protesting to provide immigrant or immigrant status to all people, all immigrants, irrespective of their religion. Because the law specifically forbids immigrants from Muslim populace. They cite the reason that in the neighboring countries or Muslim majoritarian countries, and Muslims won't be persecuted in the neighboring Muslim majoritarian countries. That idea is very flimsy.
Mm.
The Rohingyas are Muslims. They were persecuted by the majoritarian Muslims, Shias and Sunnis. We are seeing conflicts between Shias and Sunnis.
Yeah.
So everywhere, even inside the Muslims, there are minorities who get persecuted, and who were displaced and who will be displaced due to the rising ethnical tensions, local rising ethnical issues.
Mm-hmm.
So a law that is supposed to safeguard the immigrants should not be discriminative based on religion.
Mm-hmm.
So that is the crux of the most of the protest that is going on in mainland India. And when you take a closer look at it, it's not solely led by Muslim organization. Yes, there are a lot of prominent Muslim organization calling to protest, and there are more number of Muslim people hitting the streets, but rightly so. But that's not the majority. As we spoke earlier about the demographics of India, only 20% of the population is Muslims, and the present day protests are so huge.
Mm-hmm.
We see all kinds of people, all religious people, most students, young workers, even adults, older people who have a bit understanding of secularism, who at the end of the day they understand that this is discriminatory. You cannot omit certain group of people, citing their religion. So people from all across the walks of life, students or workers, industrial workers, tech workers, adults, and the liberal parties are all hitting the streets, citing this abrogation of our constitution. One of the main reasons this all the people are out on the streets is because this is an attack on the constitution.
Mm.
Because today they are changing the term secularism. I mean, they are effectively making an amendment to the Indian constitution itself, which will set precedents to lot of other anti-people policies.
Mm-hmm.
Even because it might be far-fetched, but BJP or the right-wing parties during their public addresses, they call for a single-party state.
Wow.
They cite that democracy has been a hindrance in development of India. The opposition parties are providing roadblocks or are acting as a roadblocks for the development of India. So, for the betterment of India, people need to make some sacrifices on democracy, and we will have to push for a single party state. So that's the language that they use on their political events. So the next attack on the constitution after the secularism might be the democracy itself.
Yeah, wow. I mean
So,
it does seem always like a bit of hyperbole when people call things fascist. But the way you describe it, it is, if not outright, definitely like a creeping fascist party and at least intention to create a one-party state that uses, or is at least willing to use violence, who divides the country between the ins and the outs, and then engages in anti-democratic, decisions and policies that attempt to institute their solid single-party rule. That sounds like fascism to me.
Yeah, that's a fascistic tendency that's being thrust upon, and they are, because basically they're making a change to the constitution, and any change to the constitution, they have their mandate, and the state forces, they are also majoritarianly dominated by the Hindu populace, and as any other state's armed forces does, they protect the interests of the ruling class.
Right.
Which in case of a single party system, then that they will follow their rules put down to them by their masters. So it's very, very dangerous situation that we are faced with, and I feel most of the people understand, at least to an extent, not completely to an extent, that the intricacies of an amendment to the constitution may lead to. But they feel that this is not right. They are discriminating some people on terms of their religion is not right, and then attack on the constitution will have to be defended because already Indian people suffer a lot of hardships, and even with such guarantees made in the constitution. So even once those guarantees are removed from the constitution, we don't know what are the hardships that we will have to face. So, to an extent, people understand the threat we are faced with, and people are pouring out on the streets. There are huge protests going on. There are huge rallies being organized. There are states, particularly amendments being passed in states, particularly in Kerala. It's one of our neighboring states to Bangalore, Karnataka, and Tamil Nadu. Has passed the state party. Coincidentally, it is being led by the left party CPI. has passed the state resolution in its legislature that it will not allow the CAA to pass it to be implemented in state of Kerala. We are seeing same trend set up by another state in West Bengal. So day by day, more states are coming forward and saying that no, the central government or the union government may trust this act, but we will not enforce it. But it's not fully strong, but it's at least I mean, it gives a validity to the anti-CAA protest that's been going on. It states that yeah, there is some sort of recognition and some sort of actual need for the opposition to this CAA act that's been passed now.
So I think that because I've already taken up more than an hour of your time, and there's a lot to talk about, because I have a whole bunch of questions about the CPI. You did mention that the CPI was sort of leading the charge. Did you say in Kerala they were leading the charge against, like, in making sure that it doesn't get passed there?
In Kerala,
okay.
Yeah.
So, and the CPI has had a strong influence in Kerala for a while, haven't they?
Yeah. For the better part of the post-independence, CPI, the state of Kerala has been ruled by the left party CPI.
And so, just to kind of to give a preview, when I was in India, I remember seeing sort of CPI graffiti and papers in Karnataka and stuff, and it was as somebody from the United States seeing a strong communist party that would actually gets elected and does things was kind of like amazing. But I've also heard and read quite a lot of criticism. So what, I mean, I don't want necessarily a long history of the CPI in India, but what role has the CPI played, and what role does it play now, I guess, in opposition to BJP? I'm thinking about, how to fight against the growth of the BJP and Modi, and where people who would be opposed to him go. And the Congress party seems to have completely lost any credibility. And so has it moved to the CPI, or where does the left in India go?
Right from the 1910s and 1920s, the leaders from India were influenced by the neighboring Soviet Union. The left movement was a bit active even during the early days of 1920s and 1930s, and there was a strong left movement. There were many prominent leaders, including Bhagat Singh, notable leaders like Bhagat Singh, who were influenced and inspired by the model of Soviet Republic, and who wanted to replicate such a model in India. But the intricacies of Second World War and the relationship between the allies during Second World War between Britain and Russia, since Britain and Russia were taking part fighting against the German army from a single alliance, the left leaders in India were asked not to be radical or militant in their attacks against the British government, which was in power during the times of Second World War.
Mm-hmm.
So that I feel that's the downfall. That was the starting point of downfall of left movement in India. Particularly the Stalinist ones, that are presently CPI, because pre-independence days there were a lot of left leaders and there was a lot of momentum going on with the October Revolution, 1918's October Bolshevik Revolution. But due to the effects of post-World War, the left leaders were asked to play a more passive role, and they themselves put them aside. I mean, they themselves put themselves on reserve, on or halt. They reduced their role to basically supporting the Indian National Congress party, and that has been their history since independence until the past 70 years. That has been their role. All the elections, they play a second fiddle to the Congress party. They are either allies to the Congress party. It's Communist Party of India, and they're always in alliance with the Congress party, which works for the interests of the Indian capitalist class. this has been the major flaw of the Indian left movement, and this has held back the Indian people in so many ways. Because Russia during the 1980s period was almost a similar economy as India. The left parties, if they were a bit genuine, or if they were a bit honest, or if they were clear on their ideology, on their ideas, if they had a strong leadership and revolutionary program, eh, India would not be in such a crux that it sees itself now. The huge left movement, which controlled once the whole of India, has now been reduced to only two states. They have a bit of resemblance, one in Kerala and the other being in West Bengal. And even today, even the one in West Bengal is gone now. They remain in power only in one state, that is in Kerala. And so this is the history and the role they have played throughout the period. But in this particular protest, I would say we are very much disappointed in the role of the left in this particular anti-CAA campaigns. Even before the protests got sparked and spread throughout the country, the left parties, the official left parties, proposed only amendments to the CAA Act. I mean, bill, which was before it was passed.
Yeah.
So it was a bill, Citizens Amendment Bill. The left parties did not oppose or did not ask for a revocation or halt of such a fundamentally flawed bill. They asked for amendments to such a bill. That was a role played by the left before the protest got started. But once the bill was passed in both houses, once the bill became an official act, protests spread all over the country. Youths from major colleges, mostly led by universities, prominent Muslim universities in India, and later spread on to the wider populace. Then the left parties realized, we can't satisfy ourselves with just asking for amendments. We'll have to ask for change. And then they revised their stand, and then now they are calling for scrapping of CAA Act now. One of the things that I wanted to point out is India is entering into a general strike on Jan 8th. This has nothing to do with the CAA protest. Because when someone hears of this, they will think, okay, there are a lot of protests going on in India, and India is going into general strike. It might have been called by the left party as an opposition to CAA.
Yeah.
No, the general strike was called by the left parties before even the protests against CAA was sparked. This was just to India. It has become a custom now. General strikes have become a customs now. Yearly, the left parties have, it's like token. Yearly once they will have, okay, it's like a custom. Yearly once we will do a general strike.
Well, it loses its power then, doesn't it?
Yeah, they don't have a program after the general strike. They're not calling the general strike for political reasons even.
Yeah, what
They say, okay, this is generally against to control the inflation, to improve the unemployment, to better the lives of the poor. It's like
for like liberal demands.
Yeah, exactly. Like liberal demands. What we say is they should have called for general strike once the CAA Act, some such thing as derogatory as the CAA Act was passed. Even they should have called a general strike when the demonetization was passed.
Right.
Demonetization was a program, was an anti-people's program that unified the whole country against the ruling class, because most of the workers, daily wage laborers, traders, merchants, everyone were affected by it. Many people died standing in queues to get their old notes exchanged.
So just give a brief description of what that demonetization was, because I don't just for people who don't know what that's about, give a 2-minute description.
Okay, yeah, sure. So demonetization was a move brought thrust upon the Indian people by the Modi regime, by the previous Modi regime in 2016. What the crux of the move was that the leaders of the BJP party. So what they did was they Mr. Modi, there was no discussion in the parliament, there was no bill table, there was no democratic process that was followed. One day, Mr. Modi came on live TV and announced to the India that all the rupee notes will be invalid. All the legal tender that was issued till the date, that is high value tender, 500s and thousands will be that, which makes the most significant portion of the legal tender, liquid cash that's been in circulation in the country, will be invalid, will be rendered invalid in the 5 days, and people will have to exchange these invalid currencies. And to do that, people have needed to have a bank account. People needed to create bank account, and that was the whole process of submitting of the documents, and the documents had to be verified, and people had to go and stand in queues, and there was a lot of restrictions based on the amount that can be exchanged. So all this thing was done citing uh, uh, citing black money, that is unaccounted currency, that is most of the economy, Indian economy revolves on informal basis, and the ruling party or the state gave a justification to this derogatory act, stating that this will formalize the economy. This is a move to formalize the economy, to shift the informal economy to formalize the economy and increase the taxation revenues.
Mm-hmm.
This was the move suggested, and close to 7,000 lakh crores were spent to print new notes, and all the allied logistical challenges.
Right.
Bank officers and bank employees were pushed to their extremes. Many bank workers stayed. Many working class people standing in queue to get the notes exchanged. Died. The most of the informal sector took a major hit. Merchants, street vendors, who were wage laborers, daily wage, weekly wage laborers took a hit, and and the economy hasn't rebounded from that yet. We see the most lowest GDP in the past couple of decades.
Yes, since privatization.
Yeah, since
so privatization is good for some because there's been wealth creation, but the GDP is not growing as fast as it could, especially when you look at. See, to me, there's always a major comparison you can make is between India and China, right? Big populations, big, fairly big territory, the sort of independence and revolution at the same period of time, but different development models. India sort of develops a bourgeois social democracy with the Indian Congress ruling as a sort of single party rule until the 70s, and then you have China's single party state capitalist development, and China gets 10% growth basically until now, and India gets 8 or 10% growth until the privatization. So the privatization that happened under Congress, and I think in many ways led to its downfall and the rise of BJP, has caused a slowdown in the Indian economy that was unnecessary, especially when you look at the example of China.
Yes, Kevin. With the privatization, liberalization has caused an unnecessary slowdown in the economy, and which was already the GDP was covering around maybe 8% compared to the 10% of China. But then with the oncoming of BJP into the scene in 2014, with the policies like demonetization and GST, the economy took a much bigger hit. GDP has dropped now to close to 4%. This is after changing the mechanics of how GDP gets calculated. So in the actual terms, the correct GDP would be somewhere around 2.5 to 3%.
Yeah.
So that's the hit the demonetization and the GST anti policies had on the Indian economy. And one of the reasons that I want to bring this up is the inaction of the left. Such a disastrous policy was upon close to 1 billion people of India, and the left called for a public protests. That's it.
Yeah.
They have a huge presence of trade union activists. They have a huge trade union presence. They call themselves the prominent left in India. The most thing that they did is call for symbolic protests happening in front of banks. We wrote in our papers calling for a general strike. We urged the leadership of the CPI and CPM left to use their trade union presence, to use their bank workers unions to call for a general strike and to challenge the blunder, disastrous policies of demonetization, which the left paid no heed to. They didn't have any confidence in their own cadreship, in their own program to actually challenge such disastrous policies of Modi's then, and even now that's being replicated now. 2016 to 2019, it's close to 3 years, and the left hasn't learned a thing.
And
For the past,
would you say that
yeah.
the biggest problem is the problem of leadership? Like there's that's what I always found. Like when you go to India, you can see the sheer number of people and labor power and the few like pinch points in the economy that if you were truly organized and a leadership of the left as they claim to be, that you would be able to use those pinch points to exert your power, but they just don't. And so it's not that they couldn't; it's that they don't.
Yeah, Kevin, the left leadership is disastrous. Even is disastrous. The left movement of India itself. We see, as I said earlier, regarding these policies, post demonetization, this question that movement or the leadership of the left movement, the prominent Stalinist left movement, didn't call for a general strike, was posed to one of the top leaders of the CPI. And the leader replied that we don't want to use our trade unions for political events.
That's insane.
Yeah, that's insane. What is the use of your union?
Right.
The sole reason of a trade union is to politicize the people and politicize the workers. And if they say we don't want to use it for political means, well, I don't understand what language are they speaking, or what is the intention?
Yeah.
It is a drought, I would say. It's a drought of theoretic approach to revolutionary policies or of the Indian left that has stretched Modi upon us.
It just seems strange to me that there is such a lack of sort of theoretical understanding is it that the CPI has, I mean, you've sort of said that it's basically because it's capitulated and it's been a sort of constant second seat to the Congress Party, and so it's sort of, for most people, indistinguishable from like a maybe more left version of the Congress. I mean, in some ways, it's like the new Labour Party under Tony Blair as compared to the Liberal Democrats in England, or in Britain. Like, you can't really tell the difference,
Yeah. That's what happens to the people on ground, that the masses who really want to, who really can't actually see the difference between a Congress government and the policies put forth by the left parties. Even in the couple of press releases, like a couple of that was happened a couple of weeks ago, the left party still does not consider itself, the leadership of the left party does not consider itself to be capable of acting as a rallying point for the huge masses. People, the working class people, have a number of times have hit the road on their own to challenge the disastrous policies of the government. I would like to recall one incident that happened in 2014 when the Modi regime was new, and they thrust upon the workers of India an pension reform, employee provident fund reform. Workers throughout Bangalore, the city that I am in, hit the streets in huge numbers. It was a spontaneous strike. Was not called. Particularly, it was not called by the labor unions.
Wow.
the left party, the workers themselves walked out of their works. They staged a walkout and they stormed the highway. They blocked the national highways in huge numbers. Close to a lakh people stood on the roads. There was a huge protest going on, continued for 3 days, and the reform was pushed back for the whole country. This itself, because this acts, to me, this stands as a testament to the ability of the actual workers on the ground, and the drought of the inability or the drought of political leadership to the established parties, established left Stalinist parties. They should have been the ones that should have called for a general strike. They should have the ones that should have called for a walkout.
Yeah, it's like you want to just grab them and tell them to, read Rosa Luxemburg about how important it is to take advantage of spontaneous actions by the working classes in opposition to the things that affect them, which would include the CAA protests. Like it should be a rallying cry to move that yes, you're opposed to the CAA, but you're opposed to all of the policies of the BJP and Modi, including the neoliberal policies.
Yes, Kevin. That's exactly it. The left. I don't know. I feel I even go to the extreme of calling them that they intentionally keep this instance slipping, or they are not ready to lead the movement. I mean, they are not ready. They are not. They are hesitant to lead the movement.
Wow, and it's amazing because there's so much potential for them. There's a movement to lead.
Yeah, there's a huge potential for them because the people are hitting the streets at every instances. I can in the past regime I can tell you about 10 times when there were spontaneous protests and huge opposition to government's policies, anti-people's policies, which the left failed to capitalize on, which the left slipped through.
One question that's a bit of a different question. It'll be my last one for you. Do you see, especially being in sort of Bangalore, the sort of any I wouldn't say necessarily revolutionary potential, but any sort of potential of the sort of tech worker section to are they involved in the anti-CAA protests? Are they facing the sort of economic hardships that would radicalize them? Where do you see the sort of tech workers in India?
Okay, Kevin. Yeah. When we speak about the tech workers in India, they are from the layers of petty bourgeois sections, and they are not as radicalized or not as responsive to socialist ideas as the working class, as the actual working class layers. The privatization and the liberalization with the IT boom and everything has to an extent safeguarded and has to an extent acted as a screen and has kept them unpoliticized. So the tech workers take up some issues, but they remain on a liberal bourgeois liberal stance. Even in the present anti-CAA protests going on, they limit their role in challenging the anti-CAA protests on a secular on an attack on secularism, but not they don't take it to the next thing. They don't see it as the right wing push. They don't want to connect it to the larger picture. They don't want to connect it to the other problems of the people. They want to restrict this to this, and they want to keep contain and keep it independent of other struggles happening. So I think that's a flaw with the tech workers personally, because we come across a lot of people and we see an ordinary daily wage laborer who's more akin to the real hardship and real problems of everyday life than a tech worker. So yeah, I feel they are a bit dead. Yeah.
All right. Well, that's interesting. Is there anything that we haven't talked about that you wanted to make sure that you mentioned before we wrap it up?
Yeah, I think we have mostly covered on all of the current political crisis. I just wanted to make one point. The current Stalinist, the left of India, they are not capable, they are not confident of their role to lead the working class struggle forward. They convince themselves, or they are content with playing a second role to the Congress. And one of the main reasons I believe is they don't know what next. Because once you radicalize the masses, you will have to provide them a revolutionary program. I don't think the current Stalinist left has a program to present, even if they come to the fore and even if they lead all the protests. I think that is the main reason they are hesitant to lead any struggle, or they are hesitant to lead any actually revolutionary politics. Well, because the people are ready. The people will hit the streets because every time when the general strike is called, millions, couple of million people go into strike. Couple of million people walk out of their work and they strike work and they answer their call. So if the left remains committed, and if the left remains committed to the socialist cause, had the left been remained committed to the socialist cause, they would have called for a general strike, and people will actually answer to it.
Yep.
And I think that is exactly what the left is scared about. They don't want they want the people. They want to politicize the masses only to the extent of bringing them to the general strikes, but not to a revolutionary change. That's the role that they have restrained the Indian working class to.
And there's so much revolutionary potential within the Indian working class. It's a
Yes, we as socialists, we find it painful seeing the hardships of the working class, and seeing the potential of the working class. Which, every time we read the papers after the general strike, and we see how we see really who is in charge. We see who makes who makes the economy of the country run. But the left, due to its hesitance and due to its drought in revolutionary programs, are allowing the working class and are allowing the people to toil in this hardship longer, which is leading to all sort of issues. Let it be in Kashmir, let it be in Uttar Pradesh, let it be in Gujarat, let it be the anti-CAA protest that's been going on, let it be in Northeast. Because of the inaction of the left, because of the hesitance of the left to actually call for radicalization of the people and carry on the socialist cause, more than a billion people are suffering.
Yeah, I agree with you completely. All right, Naveen, it's been awesome talking with you. I have other questions about things going on in India, and so when I do, I'm going to give you a call.
Yeah, sure, Kevin. Yeah.
All right. Well, it
was nice talking to you too.
Yeah, I appreciate you doing it.
All the best with your upcoming project.
Absolutely.
Congratulations.
You too, and keep that criticism going because you're right on the money.
Sure, Kevin. Thank you.
All right, man.
Thanks. Take care. Bye.
Bye. Thanks for listening to this episode of the Sensible Socialist Podcast. This podcast is supported by listeners like you, and no advertisements or anything will ever be said. If you want to support the podcast, please go to patreon.com/sensiblesocialist and give today. Also, please give us a review or a rating on iTunes or wherever you listen to the podcast, as it greatly helps. All right. See you next time.
हम चैन उनको मिलती